Hello and welcome to Shame Off You. I am so excited to share what I have for you tonight. Let's dive in. Have you ever felt like something is blocking the fullness that you were created for? Despite showing up, serving, wearing yourself out, trying to make your business or your ministry work, the breakthrough that you sense that you know is possible still feels just out of reach. What if I told you the problem is not that you are flawed or broken? You've just been operating from an outdated operating system. So, in this talk, you're going to finally see how this faulty operating system has been robbing from you and how to have an upgrade. I hope that you're ready. I would like for you to imagine for a moment an exercise band wrapped around your waist or a ceiling pressing down on your head, something that you can't quite break through, no matter how hard you try. I felt like this for years, and it was so incredibly frustrating. I was going after all of my goals with what Dave Ramsey refers to with gazelle like intensity. Despite all of this effort, though, nothing seemed to move the needle. Can you relate? If you do, you are not making this up. Something truly is blocking you, and the sneaky culprit behind it all likely is shame. Shame has been secretly, stealthily, and successfully stealing from you. It's robbed your finances, made your faith feel futile, and it's drained your energy to empty. And guess what? This is the worst part. Most people don't think they have any issue with shame at all. In fact, Brene Brown, famed shame researcher, says that those who have the most shame actually think they have none. That's a problem. And that was me. But there's good news. Shame is obliterated by God's grace, and you are being invited into an upgrade. So let's talk about a powerful truth. Every outcome in your life and in my life traces back to a belief, specifically several I am statements that quote, drive the ship. Many of them you're not even aware of. These beliefs fuel your resulting thoughts, which create your feelings, which drive your actions, which shape your ultimate life. This brings us to the framework called the joy quotient. Essentially, it's a mathematical formula for joylessness and living a joyful life. I know it looks like gobbledygook right now, but in essence, this is what's going on. Starting off on the left with that snake over there, it represents the things in our life that come for us, the snares, the situations, the struggles, the sicknesses that lead to a painful belief, an I am or you are accusation based on shame or fear, which produces pain in our lives. From that belief, we develop further thoughts that magnify the pain. Think about back in math class when you raise something to the power of. That's what this is doing. It makes it more powerful. And in this case, more painful. From that place of pain, feelings in us results with actual bodily impacts to our cells, our nervous system, and our organs. From those feelings, we take action. And those repeated actions create the habits of our lives, which ultimately produce the fruit in that particular area. This is a framework that the Lord downloaded to me while we were in Zion National Park in January 2025. I want to give you a little bit of brief backstory how this all went down for me. So in fourth grade, I was 8 years old. It was early in the school year. I was part of the popular clique, the five girls, and we did everything together. We had the slumber parties and the sleepovers and the birthday parties and all the things. And then one day it came to a screeching halt. There was a rumor that was starting to spread that the most popular boy and girl in our class had had sex. Well, I didn't even know what that was. And so I sensed that there was something adult in nature, of course. And so I didn't say anything for one that I didn't say this, spread this rumor, but also I did not ask for help from my parents. So this was trauma. And I'm realizing as I've learned along the way, all the layers of the onion, if you've been in any kind of therapy or counseling, that anything that was beyond our capacity or resources to manage on our own or the resources that we had available, that represents trauma. So the I am statement or belief that I started to operate was I am rejected. And the further pain thoughts resulted no one wants to be with me. I'm better off alone. I don't need people. I don't especially need other women. I can do it all by myself. The feelings that came as a result, very closed off. I lived in isolation, loneliness. I was experiencing sadness, hopelessness, and it moved me into a place of having a hardened heart. I also, down the road, would experience anxiety to a great degree. This led to actions. So for me, I decided instead of needing people any longer, I was going to go toward performance. I was going to find my value, my worth, and my achievement. So it led to drivenness, self sufficiency, striving, and accolades. And I was pretty good at it. I thought it was going okay for many years until it didn't any longer. The results exhaustion, burnout, poor spiritual fruit, or spiritual maturity and growth. This went on for years and it was not pretty. It took several quite humiliating experiences for me to recognize how addicted I had become to what I call the three P's: people pleasing, perfectionism, and performance. Essentially, some women like me, out of their shame and fear, strive to shine. They go to that place of performance. They falsely believe I am only valuable when I'm achieving, performing, and perfect. This woman feels pressure to be impressive, to feel worthy. So things like accolades, achievement, she runs hard and fast and she gets a lot of stuff done. But inwardly, she's exhausted. Perhaps in her childhood, grades and achievement and education were strongly emphasized, and she has internalized this as a means to try to gain love, acceptance, belonging, and value. That was absolutely me. On the other end of the spectrum are the women who were taught that your value comes from your service and from your usefulness to others. I call this striving to serve. The false belief here is I am worthless to others, so my only value is in how much I give, serve, and sacrifice. This woman overserves to avoid feeling unworthy. Do you see yourself in either of these patterns? It's so common. Here's the interesting thing: whether you tend towards striving to shine, like I really did, or serve, the outcome on both ends of the spectrum is the same: exhaustion, weariness, burnout. In business, these underlying shame patterns for me often led to the belief I am a failure. This is what I ran on for years. I wasn't making the amount of money or having the amount of success that I desired. And it felt like I was just banging my head against a wall. And frequently I wanted to give up. Have you been there? I thought the answer was to change my decisions, change my behavior, take a course, learn about branding, buy new software, have the right logo, try a new strategy, figure out the latest tactic. And those are all good and important things. However, it's not the main thing that's going to bring about success. The truth is, if we don't address this faulty operating system that's running, these I am or you are statements that are driving the ship, so to speak, no amount of money, courses, software, and more will give us the fruit that we so dearly desire. No matter what, you'll always come back to the level of fruit, the level of worthiness, basically, that you think you, quote, deserve. For instance, operating out of an I am unworthy, I am unloved, I am rejected, or I am a failure will never produce the right fruit. I saw this firsthand when I worked with a man who sold a $10,000 marketing program. It had all the fancy bells and whistles, the funnels, brand colors, the logo, coaching, and more. But guess what, though? The majority of those who invested, and most of them were women, did not do what they initially signed up for. They hadn't gone forward or they didn't get the results that they were looking for. I noticed this and I recognized that actually what was at play here was self rejection rooted in shame. And I knew that what they really needed was a program before they entered into this amazing course. It was very thorough, it was amazing. But they really needed to understand their identity, to really start to kick out the shame, to receive God's love, to understand grace, and to accept God's truth about themselves. And as I shared this with this particular business owner, he agreed. The thing that's so cool, I now have those programs. That's what I do. And it's so rewarding to be able to see women transform and the results right before my eyes. So, how do we begin to change this? Romans 12:2 tells us to renew our minds. But let's be honest, sometimes we say something with our mouths, but deep down, we don't believe it yet. That's called cognitive dissonance. This is where your covenant connection, your faith, and God's grace get to come into play. I would like to introduce a concept to you called the joy gap. This is basically the difference between what the enemy says, what you say, which might be similar, negative down in the pit, and then what God says. The bridge between those two things is grace. And it turns out grace changes everything. And also that gap between that low level operating thought, the false view of you, and then God's thoughts about you and his truth and his word, the difference between those two things is joy. When we receive God's truth, despite what the enemy or even what we would say, we actually grow exponentially in spiritual maturity. We experience effortless change because it's no longer us trying real hard. And again, we grow in that joy level. So let's look at the quote other equation that's fueled by grace and mercy. I call this the joy full equation. The other one was the joy less example. So here, things are fueled by grace and mercy rather than shame and fear. We begin to replace these faulty operating systems with God's truth. So we revel in God's goodness as we believe more and more of this truth. Essentially, those new thoughts lead to new feelings, which lead to new actions, which lead to a new life. And that is my story. I began to do this work of intentionally renewing my mind and looking for the good fruit, especially in my business and my finances last January. I knew that my continual proclaiming, I am such a failure, wasn't exactly producing the kind of fruit that I desired. So in May of last year, I joined a digital marketing course with resale rights, having never earned over $25,000 in a whole year in my business prior to that. Though I knew right from the get go this was going to be different. And it wasn't necessarily because of the tactic or the strategy or the thing, it was because I was so I knew right up front this was going to be a success. I hired a photographer and I told my family they were not allowed to ask me how things were going until this month came and then I revealed what happened. And long story short, I went on to earn about $30,000 in just a few months. And it was so shocking to me and my husband. But literally the only thing that changed was here. It was my thoughts, it was my mindset, and it was so powerful. So let's shift now to you and your situation. What is this operating from shame, operating from these wrong operating systems? What is this costing you living from this place? Whether it's physically in your health. I have had an autoimmune condition for the last 20 years, and I know without a shadow of a doubt, I've done a lot of research about autoimmunity. There's absolutely a shame connection. And obviously, trauma and things definitely play a part, but how is this impacting your health, your energy, your vitality, spiritually, in your relationship with God, yourself, and with others? Perhaps you're in a marriage situation that's difficult. This is absolutely playing a role, I can promise you. Financially, what is this costing you to live under this ceiling where you feel like you can't break through? In your kingdom impact through your calling and purpose, are you busy over serving or over functioning to the point where you're actually not carrying out what God told you to do. We get to answer to Him at the end of our lives. And I absolutely do not want to leave anything on the table. I don't want to live with any regrets. And I don't think you do either. So today you've seen the power of and the importance of renewing your mind to God's truth and changing the input, that belief. It seems so simple, but it is profound. Everything else down the road, the rest of the equation, so to speak, it all changes. Despite trying many times before to do this particular work of renewing my mind, what I did last January changed everything because this time I recognized shame. I understood that that was a player in this situation. I did battle with it with God's grace and His love. And I went looking for the good fruit or the evidence of this new identity. So that's why I created something called a could it be shame assessment to help you identify how shame has been robbing you, literally blocking your joy, keeping your income capped, depleting your energy, affecting your relationships, and lessening your ultimate impact. And this is going to guide you into the next step of freedom. So I invite you to head to NicoleRoth.com/shame to take this and to begin your healing journey out of it because identifying and becoming aware is the absolute first step in this process. I want to close with a line from the Scarlet Letter that sums up my whole transformation. She didn't know the weight until she felt the freedom. Let me tell you, freedom feels amazing. I am not the same woman anymore, and I want this freedom for every sister in Christ. So let me ask you, what might your life look like if you pulled up those roots of these patterns, these faulty operating systems that are based in shame or fear? What if you shifted and kicked out shame with the truth of God's grace? Let me tell you what would happen. Everything would shift. Are you ready? Let's go. Thank you so much for your attention, and I cannot wait to continue the conversation. Be sure to take the next step toward your freedom by taking the Could It Be shame assessment. And I want to give a caveat for this. I know this stuff is hard. I get it. If I would have taken this shame assessment that I had created years ago, I would have had all the highest scores probably for all of it. And I'm not the same woman anymore, but I took a step toward the pain. I took a step toward that uncomfortable place. I said, I know I need to heal from this. And so I invite you to do that courageously. When you hit submit the answers, you're going to get an email. It's going to tell you a little bit more. The only person that's going to see that ever is me. And I want you to know I take it very seriously. And I don't take it for granted that you trust me enough to hit submit and push those answers forward. That is the most courageous and brave thing that you can do. So I look forward to getting a notification email that somebody else has said, yes, I am going toward my freedom. I'm going toward my healing. If you're ready to not stay stuck or struggling any longer, I pray that you would be brave. Take the assessment and hit the submit button. Let's continue the conversation. You can always opt out of email. I don't really like email. I only want to use it to serve and bless you. So if you ever decide that's not for you, I will not be offended if you unsubscribe. So thank you so much. I'm excited to hear what you gained from this talk. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. Put a comment below that you watch this, that you're here. It's great to see people on the other side and what they're experiencing, the ahas that they're having. Or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. My handle everywhere is She Abides in Joy. And I pray that you will continue to fight for your freedom because, ladies, when shame goes, love grows and joy flows. See you soon.